Okay, so we can get something called a lap joint or a corner lap joint, so we can make a corner, or we can also get something, if we take out basically a through housing, we could also make a T-halving. So we've got corner halving, or we've got a T-halving. This joint is called a half lap or a corner lap joint, and it involves taking half the bit of material at one side and half of it the other, and then they match up, and that produces a joint that's usually used in frame construction to make up the corners of things to add a bit of strength. To mark out our half lap joint or corner lap joint, we're going to use a steel rule for doing our measuring. We're going to use our tri-square for marking our shoulders at 90 degrees, and we're going to use our marking gauge for marking the depth of the lap joint. To mark out our lap joint, because we want this bit of wood to overlap with that bit, now this bit of wood is almost 35 millimeters, but it might be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. So again, good practice is I'm going to use the bit of material to mark where I would like the shoulder to start. So again, I'm just going to make a little mark, because that's going to make sure it's exactly the right size. I'm going to use my tri-square to draw the shoulder at 90 degrees. I'm going to project down both sides. And then I'm going to use my marking gauge to mark the depth. I find it easier to put this in the vise. Take the marking gauge, which is set at 9 millimeters, which is half this thickness of the bit of material. I'm just using the marking gauge to mark halfway down that side. So I'm just marking the depth of my lap joint using my marking gauge. I'm going to take my pencil. I can darken in the lines. Now to begin to start cutting our lap joint, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to knife and notch to cut the fibres of the wood, which is going to give me a very clean shoulder here. I'm just going to use the knife to cut a slot in the bit of wood. I'm going to take my bevel edge chisel. I'm going to do the notching. I'm going to make sure it's up at 45 degrees, about 2 millimeters away, around about half the chisel at a time, and I'm just going to press into the wood, and I'm going to create a V, or the notch, by taking a little bit each time. Okay, it's a nice notch. Tenon saw. I'm going to make sure that the line I'm cutting down to is above the jaws of the vise. Take the tenon saw, put it in the groove. I'm going to just gently cut down until I get down to the correct depth. Good on this side, good on that side. I'm now going to take my time and I'm going to line up the line I've made with the marking gauge to the jaws of the vise, so I can't take off too much. Take my bevel edge chisel and my mallet, using it the correct way around. I'm just going to use it to move my small bit of the corner there. Angling the chisel down until I'm right on the jaws of the vise on one side. Flip it round. Line up again. A little bit at a time, and because the chisel works its way out the wood all the time, I should be able to create a peak in the middle. And then to get rid of the peak in the middle, turn the chisel up to remove most of this material. Now I'm going to take the chisel and move it around the other way, keeping it flat on the jaw of my vise, working in towards the shoulder. I'm just going to use that to pare away a bit of the material there. And I'll flip it around the other way. See if we can make that as flat as possible. And we should avoid using a file because that keeps everything much squarer and neater for a lap joint. Now that I've cut a lap out of both sides, these should go nice together and they all fit together to make a nice neat joint. Okay, to make a T-halving, I've already created the halving on one side. I'm going to offer up the bit of material to make sure I mark the exact width I need, because I want this bit to slot into here. I'm then going to use my tri-square to mark the two shoulders. I'm going to mark the sides of the shoulders down the side of the wood. Now I'm going to use my marking gauge. Again, if you can use your bench vise as much as possible, makes life a bit easier. I'm just going to use it to mark the depth. Like I say, this is another through housing joint, I suppose. Take the pencil, darken in the depth on both sides, and then hatch off the waist. Put it in the vise. Knifing and notching. Great technique. Knife on the line I want to cut. Slide the tri-square up till it touches. Drive back 3 or 4 times, severing all the fibres of the wood. I'm going to flip this around the other way. So the more of my stock of the tri-square touches the wood, pop it in the line I want to cut. Then to notch, take the chisel, 45 degrees. Just get a nice little groove in that one. Then from the other side. Raise it up a little bit in the vise to make sure when I'm cutting down to the line I don't cut the bench. Tenon saw in the groove. Make sure I'm just down to the line. That's not quite deep enough, so I'm just going to make it a little bit deeper. Then taking a couple of seconds to make sure I'm now going to line up the top of the vise with the line or the depth of where I want to chisel down to. On both sides. Take my bevel edge chisel round the right way, take off the corner, and I angle the chisel getting closer to the bench or the top of the vise. one side. Up another. To remove the high spot. And take the chisel, flip it round the other way, and just use it to pare off the bottom. Okay, and if you work at a slight angle, it cuts the wood off a little bit easier. And from one side, working from another. Again, there should be no files necessary, just using the chisel to level off the bottom. And we've created a T-Halving as well.